Hello, how are you all doing? I don't know how I got on here. I'm actually piggybacking off of a video that a friend of mine in the UK named Jamie Biggs was doing. He didn't stay on very long, so I decided to piggyback off of him to get a a Facebook Live on, and to be able to tell you hello. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to make one recently, but I want to share with you that I am very, very, very happy that I've been keeping up with your positive posts and all the good things that you have to say and share. Those things really make me feel good, and they uplift me big time. I wake up every day and look for inspirational quotes from you all. I just happen to be a person that just loves quotes, and I'm so very, very glad that you are all waking up each day trying to find something positive to contribute. I should say, dropping some positive jewels into the already chaotic pool that we call life, and we're all trying to, find our way through on this journey. But it feels good to know that when I look at the homepage on Facebook and I find thoughtful quotes many of you post, because inspiration is always needed, and it's always good to inspire as much as possible. The word inspire, I'm sure you know, it means to inspirit. And when you inspirit something, you inflame it. When you inflame a thing, what you're doing is that you are blowing life into a situation, into the lives of other people, primarily. And that is always very, very good. Hey, Jamie. And I'm piggybacking off of you right now because I did not know how to get on Facebook Live. They were sending me to Chrome, telling me I had to go over to Chrome to, hey Jamie, and telling me I had to go to Chrome to actually do a video. So I'm piggybacking off of yours. What's up, Johnny Bullock? How you doing, bro? It's really good to see you on here, man. Really, really good. Bro, we done come a long way. Hey, mate. Johnny Bullock is one of the individuals that I grew up under when I was in prison for 33 years. He's one of the guys that I am always writing about, who sheltered and watched over me and kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. Sup, bro? They kept me on the straight and narrow to make sure that I didn't get involved in anything that could possibly harm me or hurt me or anything like that. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that 33-year stint that I did in prison. And I want to talk about it in such a way as to where I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me as an individual, because I wasn't doing time by myself. I was doing time with thousands of other men in the state of Louisiana as well. Some who had been locked up even before I was born. Henry Montgomery, if you can remember that name, Henry Montgomery. You can actually Google him. He got locked up in 1963 at 17 years old for second-degree murder of an off-duty police officer while he was truant from school, who had came through the woods, and he turned around and shot and realized that he had shot in the small town he lived in at this particular time a white man. So he took off running and all that. And he's been in prison for the better part of 50 plus years now. 1963 from 2020, yeah, I think it's 57, if I'm not mistaken, years since he was 17 years old. What I want to hit on is the fact that the laws have changed in the United States now to where the Supreme Court has said that juveniles cannot be sentenced to adult facilities. Okay, even though the law is still saying that they can receive life sentences, and that after 25 years, they can be brought up and considered for parole consideration. And that's what we actually face here in this country, in many states, where we have what's called parole consideration. We can be considered for parole, meaning that even after having served 25 years, that we can still go up on the board and for the smallest infraction get denied. And in many instances, we have men that are going up on the board that have served 30 and 40 years and are getting denied. But again, I don't want to talk about the law. I want to talk about something that we don't spend a lot of time talking about in prison, but we know that it's a factor that existed in our lives. And what that is our upbringing as children. You know the old saying, people are always saying that a lot of stuff begins at home, you know, and to a large degree, that's actually true. A lot of stuff does begin at home. You know, the stuff that begins at home is usually some form of abuse, where back in the days we used to call that a spanking, you know, getting whipped with extension cords, sticks, getting punched down by uncles or our fathers or whatever, you know, and we used to call that stuff being chastised or being punished. You know, these days they call that child abuse. All right. Now, we look at today's youth and we have to ask ourselves, well, are these kids being put through what we were put through when we were coming up as children? And for the most part, they aren't being abused at home physically like we were, but there's another kind of abuse that's going on, and that's what I want to talk about. The kind of abuse that I see going on right now, because I actually haven't been able to get into schools or anything and to be able to talk to kids and all that. And I think that for the most part, the people who have asked me to come and speak at their schools are actually asking me to come and speak at their schools because they believe that their children are bad and that their children need someone to tell their story about what they went through as a juvenile so that they could deter these kids from going to prison. But here's what I want to say about child abuse these days. Now, my upbringing saw a lot of pain, physical, a lot of pain mental, a lot of pain emotional. What I mean by that is this. If a parent is consistently telling a child, you're a bad child, you're a bad child, you're a bad child, what you're doing is the constant repetition of telling the child that he's a bad child, the child begins to believe, because it's only a human thing that takes place. If you tell someone something long enough and their mind isn't strong enough, then they'll begin to believe what it is that you're saying. So if you're constantly telling the child that the child is bad, and if you're constantly doing things as a result of what you believe the child is, beating on the child, cussing the child out, or humiliating them in public and stuff like that, well then, ironically, a unique thing takes place inside of the human psyche. And what takes place is, for a lack of any a physical loving affection, the child begins to display behavior becoming a bad child. Meaning, they do things to get your attention to hurt them, because in that way they'll feel like that they actually have your love and affection. Now that may seem kind of odd, but I think that when I was a child, the mistake that the adults made with me was thinking that I knew better. Okay, here's the reality of that. I didn't know better. I thought I knew better. I thought by the time I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old that I actually knew some stuff. But the reality was that I didn't know anything. When parents forget that they were children, when parents forget that they were once 12 and 13 and 14 years old and begin to expect that children would conduct themselves as adults do, which is another reason why the Supreme Court changed the laws. The Supreme Court said that a child's brain has not stopped fully developing until they're like, you know, in their 20s. But even a juvenile delinquency goes past the age 25. Yes. Brain development goes past the age 25. It doesn't stop at 18 years old. A different level of consciousness takes place at 18 years old. And it goes even further when a person becomes 21, and goes even further when a person becomes 25, and goes even further when you hit age 30. But science has proven that brain development does not occur the same way in each individual. So if you're constantly badgering a child and telling a child that the child is bad, that the child is a failure, that the child will never amount up to anything, that the child is just like their father who may have mistreated you as a woman, or that the child is just like their mother, for whatever reason the guy is you know downplaying his mother or whatever. If you're repetitiously feeding these thoughts to a adolescent's brain, well, when the child goes out and starts doing things that you feel he should know better than to do, you have to ask yourself a question. Where did that kind of behavior actually initiate from? It's learned behavior. Children do what they see. Children utter what they hear. Children comprehend and understand what's put out before them. They're not the ones that made the world that they were born into. They are the ones who are trying to learn the world that they have been newly introduced to. You can't always look at a child and assume that they understand. That's why as a parent, we tell our children the same thing over and over and over again. This is why when you were a child, the same thing was told to you over and over and over again, because you did not understand. Loving parents love enough to realize that they'll have to continuously repeat things. This is not the way to repeat things to your child. That's not the way. This is not the way to repeat things to your child. A belt is not the way to repeat things to your child. A stick is not the way. Cussing them out and insulting them is not the way. Seeing or watching you show them more disdain than love is not the way. I want to tell you right now, I wish my parents would have understood when I was a child that I was not going to stop making mistakes as long as I walk the face of the earth, because I don't have the power to do that. I never had the power to quit making mistakes. I never had that power. Children do not have that power. It's a sad day when the U.S. Supreme Court has to reach down and change the laws to get people to understand that you cannot treat children as adults. You cannot convict children and send them to prisons where you have adults. Lots of people don't understand what actually took place when those of us who were children were placed in prison. I want to tell you what happened. Exactly what I wrote on my Facebook page happened. The people that were in prison picked up where the society left off at, and we became educated in there by them. The guys in prison picked up where society left off at. Our education continued. We had to remold and reshape our way of thinking and how we would understand adult supervision, because it was the same guys that were in prison that looked at us and said, man, they done sent children in here among us. What are we gonna do? Unfortunately, I am so sorry that people watch the Shawshank Redemption and think that that's just how all prisons are ran. You know, the prisons that we were in down in Louisiana were not ran like that when I got locked up. Now, before I got locked up, they were some pretty rough places. But, you know, while I was there, I met some of the brightest and most intelligent people I'd ever seen in my life. And to this day, I have been trying to find people who equal them in measure. And I found out what family really is while I was there in prison, too. Because those same women that I saw coming up there, all those mothers and sisters and aunties and grandmothers and daddies that was coming up there, let me tell you what was happening to them. The same way that you can repeat things to a child and they assimilate that behavior, the people who were coming up there and sacrificing to come and visit us all those decades begin to do something inside their heads too. They were bonded with us and began to think like us in many ways. They assimilated our way of speaking because we had a new language when they came up there and seen us. We were saying stuff like, you heard me? And what you heard me mean is that I've ended my statement, do you understand? You know, we were saying things like, see what I'm saying? And see what I'm saying was the same thing. Do you understand? Here's my whole point. It's not so much the lingo. It's not so much the slang that I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that trying to interact with us and continue to show that they loved and supported us meant that they had to bond with us. Listen to me. Interacting with us to show that they loved and supported us meant that they had to bond with us. What do I mean by that? Mama began to feel everything that her son was going through while he was incarcerated. Mama began to understand what her son was actually enduring while he was incarcerated. Mama began to understand the pressure and the pain of being under a supervised environment where her child could no longer do anything that he wanted to do anymore. He had to abide by a whole new set of rules. It was still an authoritarian system, no different than the system that he came from while he was living at home. But if there was already abuse at home, The mind of this child, the mind of that man did something extremely unique. It molded in and fitted in perfectly in prison. It didn't mean that he liked it in prison, that we enjoyed being in prison, but it was the environment that we were in at the time. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because I really, really, really want you to consider something. Mind the way you speak to people. Mind the way you think about people. Mind the way you feel about them. Mind the way you speak to children. Mind the way you feel about them. Mind the way that you address your elders. Mind the way that you address your elders. More than anything else, if you're going to be a better person and do better by other people, you have to mind the way you look at yourself. Because some of the most hateful and spiteful things that come out of us are a result of what we are tied to in our own experiences. Remember what I told you. The one thing that we did not speak about a lot in prison, seriously, was about how we were brought up, or the things that influenced our behavior when we were children. And it wasn't because the parents were bad. It wasn't because the parents were bad. Mama beat me the way she beat me because she got beat like that herself. Daddy talked to me the way he talked to me because he was spoken to like that. Mama probably was treated the way she was treated because grandmama probably treated her that way. Daddy treated me the way he treated me because 9 times out of 10, Daddy got treated that way too. We can change the paradigm and begin to do a lot better and not always depend upon the system to take care of our kids. Because I'm going to tell you how the system is going to take care of your kids. They're going to try to medicate them because they're going to feed into exactly what you're saying as a parent. I have a bad child. And guess what the system is going to say? You know what? You're absolutely right. You do have a bad child. Here, give them this pill right here. They're going to be all right. And we all know the crisis that took place with Ritalin. Ritalin had the same side effects as crack. So it really was no surprising thing when the trial was taken off of Ritalin that they ran to crack. It really was no surprising thing when the child was taken off of these other psychotropic drugs that they were put on. And that's actually what those drugs are. They're psychotropic drugs. The system does not have the solution for how you should raise your child. The system does not have the solution for how you should raise your child. There is no such thing as a bad child, but there is a such thing as a child who is disobedient when you tell them something, so you find loving ways to correct them. But you're not going to be able to correct a child's behavior by abusing a child. You're not going to be able to correct anybody's behavior by always putting them down every time they make a human mistake. People, and many of the people that you love, are going to always make mistakes that disappoint you. Find loving ways to inspire them. Remember, the word inspire means to inspirit. Find loving ways to inspire them, to pick them up and encourage them to do better. I'm speaking to you like this right now for a reason, because this is what I'm going through right now. I came out here with a lot of expectations from the people who were closest to me. I came out here with those expectations, and that was my mistake. It was a grave mistake that I made, because I'm always telling people you can never live up to the expectations of others. And I made the mistake in believing that a lot of stuff that was unresolved in the past could be resolved right now, and we could all get better for it. I was wrong. I was wrong. It doesn't make the people bad that I expected to be good with. It was my fault for expecting them to be what I wanted them to be. You cannot expect your children, you cannot expect your loved ones, you cannot expect your spouse, you cannot expect your best friend. You can't expect anybody to live up to your expectations. But what you can do is be an inspiration, first to yourself and then to others. If you are constantly telling someone and constantly putting someone down and telling them that they are something distasteful and bad, it's not because the person that you are speaking to is actually what you're saying. There's some issues that are going on inside you. Just like we had issues that we didn't discuss while we was in prison that we had going on that led us there in the first place. Maybe you've got some issues going on that you need to deal with yourself. And the best way to deal with those issues are to confront them and ask yourself, why would I look at this 5-year-old and tell this 5-year-old you're a bad boy? Why would I tell another adult that my niece or my nephew is a bad child? And when that person abuses, mistreats them, talks crazy to them, or does anything else to harm them, I have to ask myself a question. Why would they feel comfortable in doing something like that? There are several answers. Maybe it happened to them. But here's a reason that you do not want the person to ever say, well, you're the one that said that it was bad anyway. Well, you're the one that said that they needed that anyway. It begins and it ends with you. We can do better. We can do a lot better with how we speak to our children. We can do a lot better with how much of an intervention we actually allow the system to have in the rearing of our children. We can do a lot better. There is no excuse for medicating a child with a psychotropic drug. If your 4 or 5 year old is not running around trying to get into something, trying to do something that he ain't got no business doing or whatever, something is seriously wrong. If the medication that a child is taking has him sleeping all the time or just walking around moping and not asking questions like why, the eternal question, why? You can ask why for anything. But if the child is not doing it, if they're not jumping around and being energetic and, being a loving, explosive spirit, something is wrong, seriously wrong. The one thing you don't want to find out that's wrong with that child is that they are afraid of you, their guardian, their caretakers, the person who's supposed to love and protect them. You don't want your children growing up afraid of you. Here's another thing that happens with teenagers, because it happened with me. I don't want to speak about your experience because I don't know. But what happened with me was, it was so much pain and frustration at home that I went out in society and I did something that led me to prison. I thought being angry and aggressive and violent was good because I experienced a lot of anger, aggression, and violence at home. It shouldn't have been there, but it was there. It wasn't because my parents were bad. It's because my parents' only point of reference was what they endured. So they thought that that was the best way to bring me up. And as a result, it led me where it led me. Miss Buchanan, my mom, she says, how do you uproot those words you plant in them? That's a good question. The first thing I'm going to tell you, Mom, is that I don't have the answer for that. The second thing I'm going to do is tell you my opinion about it. But the first thing I'm telling you is that I don't have the answer. The second thing I'm going to tell you is my opinion. Mom says, how do you uproot those words you planted in them? In other words, how do you undo the damage that was done? Well, I think, in my opinion, Mom, that the best way to undo that kind of damage is to check yourself first. I think that we all should check ourselves first. I think the parent that does that, I think the adult that does that should check themselves first. Can you do better? And if you can do better, then go back and rectify the situation and apologize. Here's a good way to chastise your children. If you have to spank them, go back to them later and clearly explain to them in a much more calmer voice why they had to be punished. Go back and explain to your children why you had to punish them. Don't just punish them and leave it at that. Go back and talk to them and explain to them, because I'm telling you, if you don't do that, what could happen and will happen is they'll grow thinking, oh, well, my mama did it to me. Oh, well, my daddy did it to me. And they ain't try to explain nothing. You know what we did when we was in prison, when we talked about the spankings and stuff that we got at home? We glamorized it. Oh, yeah, man, my daddy used to beat me with the heel of a platform shoe. Oh, yeah, man, my uncle used to take me out in the backyard and just punch me down. Yeah. And that's not cool. Because you know how many of the same guys we watch get out of prison and come right back? Because we never seriously dealt with the issues that we were going through as a result of that abuse. And so they perpetuated the same behavior. Listen to me, Mom. It's called behavioral perpetuation. And what that means is I'll do the same thing that I've been habitually practicing for so long, thinking it's right because it was done to me. I'll do that. Well, my uncle did it to me. Well, my auntie did it to me. My grandmother did it to me. And I'll perpetuate that same behavior. We have to begin again to change the paradigm. And what that means is change the way that we do things. You can still punish a child. Every now and then a child might need a little pat on the bottom. Okay, but there's a difference between a pat on the bottom and bruised ribs. There's a difference between a pat on the bottom and a black eye. There's a difference between a pat on the bottom and a missing tooth. There's a difference between a pat on the bottom and a broke nose or a sprung arm, snatching your kids in public and snatching their arm out of place and stuff like that. There's a difference between chastising your child and abusing your child. And listen, when you talk bad to them or do bad things to them in public, what do you think some predator that's sitting by watching is thinking? Oh, shoot, I can snatch them and his mom ain't even gonna miss him. I mean, you did say it was a bad child, right? Well, let me go and just take him off your hand right quick. You'd be surprised how your public displays encourage other people to do some of the dirt that they got going on inside their head anyway. And all they're really looking for is an excuse. So what you have to do is, exactly, my cuz said, break the generational curse. We went through enough already. We go through enough already with all the pains that are placed on us now. The prison system in this country has almost 3 million people incarcerated in there, and one of the things that we tend not to want to deal with is the pain of the past. Brother Greg said, "Minister, you are an inspiration as always, bro. You are the." Well, I ain't that smart. Yeah, I'm not that smart, brother, but I appreciate it. But the point of my making this live is because we have a lot of habitual behavioral perpetuations. In other words, we're carrying on ills that we went through, that our parents endured and our grandparents and great-grandparents endured, and we make justifications for it by the simple little things that we say out of our mouth. It's a bad child. That child needs a whooping. That child needs this. That child needs that. And I agree with you, Mom. I do agree with you. But again, the thing I'm trying to emphasize is that the people who are perpetuating these things, they don't know any better. And they don't know any better because it's what was done to them. And so what they do is they carry this on, and they instill that into the soul that they're dealing with. And it's just not with children. It's in domestic relationships as well, to where a woman gets beat on so much to where, you know, when somebody goes along and tells her, girl, you need to leave him. Oh, but he only does that because he loves me. Really? Really? That's a very interesting definition for love, but we can do better. This is all I'm saying. I watched my birth mother go through a lot of abuse, and she never left her abuser. You know, let her tell it. He loved her. You know, I've seen women since I've been out here, you know, running around with the same dude that's beating on her and taking her little money from her from being a waitress or whatever, and they shooting dope with it. And if you ask her why she's doing that, he loves me. You know, and I watch kids that I was locked up with. You know, if you talk to the average one of them and ask them what do they think was a cause of their coming to prison, one of the things that they're not going to say is that it was because of child abuse. Why aren't they going to say that? Because 9 times out of 10, their abuser is also on their visiting list coming up there to see them, and that's the only person on the outside that they got to hold on to. You know, that's the only person they got to hold on to, because nobody else communicates with them the way this person does. But they're not going to tell you, yeah, that's my mom, but you know, my mom also abused me, or that's my dad, but my dad also abused me. You know, they're not gonna say things like that. And look, I have to go back in here and go wash these people's dishes, but I want to say this too. If you know somebody that doesn't know any better when it comes to rearing their children, that does abuse their children, and they're a friend of yours, try to do this. Try to have a talk with them. Out of the presence of the child, try to have a talk with them and ask them a question. How do you think the way you're treating your child is gonna help them in their future? Emphasize the word their future, because I don't think what a lot of parents get a lot of time is, God didn't give you the gift of bringing a child in the world so that you can control their lives. God gave you the gift of bringing a child in the world so that you can help them grow up and to hopefully do a lot better than you. That's reality. And if you think I'm lying, think back to when you were a teenager, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, and what was going through your head. You too couldn't wait to get out so you can go do your thing. Because for the most part, you didn't want to be where the people that raised you were at. You wanted to do better. You had dreams about being a multimillionaire, dreams about being a football player, dreams about being, something great. But you didn't dream about being like they were. You wanted to do better. You wanted to do a lot better. I hear that a lot from my mom, my stepmother. She tells me, "You're just like your daddy." And I be thinking to myself, "No, I'm not." But she's always telling me that. Okay, you can tell me that as long as you want. I am not gonna believe it. I love you too, Mom. I am not gonna believe that. And I'm gonna leave you on that note. I put a post out today that says, think beyond the expectations that others may, believe beyond the expectations that others may have of you. If you are dealing with somebody who ain't never got nothing good to say to you whenever you come around, listen to me. Don't stand for that psychological abuse. Move on away from that person until they can say something conducive to your growth. Like, I don't know, good morning, I love you, good to see you today, give me a hug. You know what I mean? That's one of the first steps in changing the paradigm, is seeing yourself different enough to where you're able to, send that love out that all human beings deserve. They teach that in Buddhism, to put yourself in the shoes of the other person and ask yourself, why do they act like that? You know what I mean? That's a way that I shouldn't act. Or why do I do the things that I do? Maybe I should change that behavior. Okay, I just spanked my child and he's in there crying. He just told me he hates me. Let me go in here and talk to him right quick. Look, this is the reason why I spanked you, or this is the reason why I shouted at you, or this is the reason you can't go to the party. Don't just leave them like that. When we were kids, we got told we couldn't do something, we got hit, and nobody came and tried to explain nothing. They just tried to make us feel bad. But one of the things that you can do is follow your child into the room about 15, 20 minutes after you have calmed down, and go in there and hug them and sincerely tell them, "Mama, sorry for spanking you, but this is the reason I did it, and I'm sorry." And you can even go so far as to ask them this: what do you think I should do in the future in case you do something else that angers mommy? They'll give you some suggestions. Take my toys, anything, but don't hit me. Don't let me have no ice cream. But what they're trying to say is, stop hitting me. Stop hurting me. You're supposed to love me. Encourage me, inspire me, but don't hurt me. They do not understand that they need a spanking. No child, you don't understand when somebody put their hands on you that that's something you need, because you don't want nobody hitting on you. So it's the same principle. It doesn't change. They're still humans. They are humans in development. They are humans in transition. And it's good to remember that. You can remember it best if you put yourselves in their shoes. If I would have done what he did, or if I would have done what she did, would I want to be slapped until the spit went out my mouth and I was almost knocked out? Oh yeah, my mama did it to me, but I didn't like it then. And if you're a person that came from an abusive childhood, if your parents didn't teach you anything else, they taught you how not to treat your own children. Listen to me. If you are a person that was in an abusive relationship and you got out of that relationship, the next relationship you get into should teach you this. You know how you should not be treated. So you find you somebody who's going to appreciate you for what you have on the inside, and you move forward with that person. Abuse isn't just a physical thing. Abuse is also a verbal thing. Abuse can also be an emotional and spiritual thing. If you're going to church and all Rev keep talking about is how hot hell is going to be and how many times you're going to burn to a crisp, you need another church. Right. You need to go to another church. You don't need that church right there, because if he can give you a graphic description of just how hot hell is, how many times he done went there and came back? What he got going on in the name of Jesus? You know what I'm saying? Right. Love the fact that you can love. Embrace the fact that you can be a person who can be a whole lot better than what other people expect of you. I will reiterate this to you again. A lot of you see me and you see how I am and you tell me how sharp I am and all this and how wonderful a speaker I am and all. It's like I told you in my post. Listen, I'm not no gangster or a thug. I did 33 years for a second-degree murder that I am not proud of, but I will tell you this. I am proud of the fact that I ran into well-educated and decent human beings in that prison system that couldn't fathom the thought of me doing some of the stuff that they were doing. And it was because of them that I was able to become the person that I am today. And I thank all of them, from the guys that were doing some of the worst stuff under the sun to all the ones that, were just trying to make themselves better. I became who I am because of it all, not because of any one kind of people or guys that went to church or, the Muslims or all that. Listen, I accept people for how they present themselves to me because I want to be a better person. In order for me to be a better person, the main thing I had to deal with was the fact of how I wound up in that place in the first place. And the way I wound up in there is I didn't know what to do with my experiences. I didn't know how to face them. I didn't know how to come face to face with what I went through that led me there. Nobody just wakes up one day and decides they want to go to prison. That stuff starts way earlier than that. And it leads up to it if there's no proper intervention. The way to keep your children, and this is just my suggestion, I'm not saying it's going to work in every case, but the way to keep your children out of the hands of the system, start now. Love on them. Laugh with them. Talk with them. If you have to chastise them, it's not going to hurt you to go and explain why. Don't leave them with that thought. Don't leave them with the thought that you hurt them. Go in there and talk to them. Go in there and get them to understand. Go in there and promise them that mommy's going to do better. Go in there and promise them dad is going to do better. Go in there and promise them grandma going to get better. I'm sorry. I apologize. Let them see that you're not too big to say I'm sorry. Because those are good qualities that you can perpetuate and put inside them as well. Just like we can put the bad stuff in, we can put the good stuff in. They're going to carry life lessons with them. Don't make it all bad for them. Y'all be blessed. Be a blessing.
I gotta go wash these people dishes, you
Love y'all.